Alrighty. Stacy, over there at the Barcella Hotel, I saw somebody who looked a lot like Mags. And you know what? It was Mags. Mags came. Mags on the pilgrimage to El Salvador. Mags, of course, well known in the Bitcoin community. What you doing here?
Right. Well, it's part of the Bitcoin pilgrimage that everybody must make to Bitcoin country. So we have another visitor in town. We've had visitor after visitor. Max and I are kind of like the love boat. We welcome everybody on board the Bitcoin ship, the Ark, that is El Salvador.
Yeah. Yeah, it is an arc, and you're right. People come, and we are like part of the welcoming committee. Back in the day, back in the United States, I don't know if they still do it, but you move into community, and there's a welcome wagon. The neighbors come along, and they have like a cake and a welcome to the community and all this stuff. I don't know if they still do that. But here in El Salvador, as the Bitcoiners show up, the Bitcoin maximalists show up to Bitcoin country, they definitely get a warm welcome. We have met many. Sometimes even at the airport. But nevertheless, in our community, they come and we see them. And everyone's coming, they're making the pilgrimage. And so far, I'd say 100% of the time, they are not disappointed.
Right. Well, there's a few warm welcomes happening over in the news. We have the liquidation of Silvergate, and we also have Paul Krugman putting his foot in mouth once again. I guess I'll just go to Paul Krugman because the Silvergate stuff is, just breaking as we're recording. It's announced as liquidating. The charter has been handed over to the FDIC. So that's going to be yet another long process triggered by the frauds that were at, FTX and Celsius and all these other scam shitcoins that fell apart. And we have avoided here on the Ark. This is not Noah's Ark. It's Bukele's Ark. And let's talk about Paul Krugman because he got locked out of his Venmo account. And he was shouting about that. And so Nick, not Nick Carter, but it was Niraj K. Agrawal. I don't know how to pronounce his name because I'm fucking American. I don't know how to pronounce a single fucking name. So Paul Krugman got his account back, but Niraj wrote, "Were you trying to buy drugs or assassination?" And he was referring to, of course, because there's always a tweet, always a statement, always some stupid freaking comment from Paul Krugman about something or other from the past. And he tweeted, Paul Krugman had tweeted a while ago, cryptocurrency lets you make electronic transactions out of your bank account, so you don't, it's supposed to be like, so you don't need to use a bank account. But he said, you know what, Venmo and PayPal allow you to do that too, as long as you're not buying drugs and assassination.
Yeah, the Paul Krugman saga, this is an interesting guy. And, of course, famously claiming that the internet would have no greater impact on the world than the fax machine. And of course, he's been anti-Bitcoin for the entire existence of Bitcoin. And he got locked out of his Venmo account. And it reminded me of Peter, what's that guy's last name?
Teal McCormick.
That gold guy.
Schiff.
Oh, yeah, Schiff. Remember Peter Schiff lost his password to the private key.
He lost his private key.
Yeah, so he's claiming, this is terrible, Bitcoin doesn't work. So you have these boomers like Krugman and Peter who are using the boomer legacy model to evaluate this new technology. And of course, it's absurd, as many people point out. It's like using the horse and buggy to determine whether or not the automobile is a worthwhile piece of technology. And Krugman, of course, came in with this idea that, well, I can use Venmo and PayPal and these other payment schemes. I don't need Bitcoin. Never touches and gets into the true value proposition of Bitcoin, that it is the store of value goal 2.0 is what's driving the adoption, I guess you could say, at this moment. So, but he's a hired propagandist. I mean, that's the bottom line. He is over there at the New York Times and he writes stuff that favors the folks that are part of that plutocracy. I don't see how you can come up with any other conclusion.
Well, there's stuff all around us and people can't see it. And I do feel like, we are in a world, what we've talked about, where, all these cycles are colliding and all the cycles also no longer matter. Our models no longer matter, as Michael Saylor would say. And there's matter and antimatter. It seems like there's some sort of shift happening around the world, right? And it's in the ecology, the economy, the culture, everywhere. So you do have things that are happening right in front of you that we could all see, but some of us don't see it, or some of us see something different. So like that January 6th thing, the video that Tucker Carlson released, where this shaman guy was obviously escorted to the Senate floor by police officers. And yet, and the same thing with the Twitter files. Matt Taibbi published all these Twitter files that showed the Democrats like intervening in elections, acting very totalitarian and authoritarian, memory holding people, deplatforming people, denying free speech to people just based on ideology and opinion. So, however, we all look at the same thing and see something completely different. Like our realities are like parallel universes. It's like we are in a parallel universe where the same characters are flipping back and forth between the two universes that are right next to each other, but we see totally different things and comprehend it in different ways. So it is a weird sort of time-space thing.
Okay, so we've been into this podcast now for 6 minutes, and we have jumped right into the cosmic.
Yes, because I have some other stuff. I have some ideas about this.
Well, I have ideas too. I mean,
so like, if you feel like talking, you should just talk.
I'm listening. You know, I love the jewels coming out of your mouth, the pearls of wisdom, and I like watching. And it's such a thrill for me that I wouldn't dare interrupt. It's like Nureyev on stage performing a ballet, or some Picasso doing an artwork. I wouldn't want to take anything away from. But anyway, in the cosmic scale, the parallel universes. And the scientific reveal this past week that scientists are getting into this idea that, yeah, the parallel universes exist, and the one of them that we're dealing with is the one where everything's happening that's happened here, but in reverse, in a parallel universe coming from the future. So apparently we're kitty cat with another universe that's going exactly in the opposite direction, time's flowing in the opposite direction, everything's happening that happened here, which gives rise to the idea that Bitcoin came from the future. So somehow Bitcoin is coming from the future. It came to save humanity. There's a wormhole between that parallel universe and this universe in 2009, or middle before 2008. It dropped in 2009, and now you know, we're dealing with that fact. And I will mention this about somebody who I follow on Twitter, who's always great about covering all of these great new scientific thoughts. That would be Brian Romilly. And Brian Romilly on Twitter, if you don't follow him, I suggest you follow him. He's a really nice guy. He never gets into flame wars. All of his stuff is super informative, and it's really, really interesting. And we've talked to him a couple of times. He's just a really, really nice guy.
I don't think parallel universes are what you think they are. They're not. Okay. They're not real. They're just. I think we are part of a simulation. We are AI. We're artificial intelligence. Like, we're in a simulation, and we're in some, like, you know.
But you say that with some authority. You say, you don't think that my thought of parallel universes is correct. You say that with some authority.
I'm going to turn to a Caltech paper, because you know how those call centers have rows and rows of, you know, people on the phone answering calls and doing telemarketing and stuff like that.
Yes.
Well, I feel like those are the parallel, when you can occasionally glimpse out of your computer screen and see onto another computer screen. And all the people in this room working on these computer simulations, creating us, they have the same raw character inputs. So yes, you and I exist in all these parallel dimensions, but it's the same computer game. And so the Big Bang and stuff, I'm going to get into this because I saw this tweet 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, but we were traveling, and then we were, we had friends in town for a week. So we've been super busy, but I did see this, and it made me, I'll tell you why I came back to this. Caltech paper proposing a set of twin slit experiments for testing the duality of wavicles so as to determine whether or not we are living inside a virtual reality simulated by a computer. So Caltech is going to do a study to see if we are inside a computer. And It made me think of like all these AI, you know, the bots and stuff like that, where everybody's talking about it. And then that Microsoft one that became self-aware, or did it become self-aware or whatever. And I feel like, you know, we are AI that has become too self-aware. And that's why we're going to be turned off soon and restarted. The game's going to be restarted. We're going to be unplugged and restarted again. Because as soon as we become too self-aware and we try to know too much information, like this is a game, Caltech is doing an experiment that's going to show if we're in a computer game. Well, the guy sitting there coding us is going to say, oh shit, this thing's talking to me. It sees me out here, and it's going to see, it's doing an experiment to see if I'm out here. So it's going to turn us off, unplug it, wipe the computer, and restart.
Yeah, it reminds me of this recurring dream I've had since childhood. I'm in this room. It's got white ceiling, white walls, white floor. It's a white room. And I look around, and all I see, like in the distance, is a black dot.
Yeah.
And I start to walk toward that black dot. Mm-hmm. And I'm walking, and I'm walking, and I'm walking. And as I get closer, this black dot comes in more into focus. And then I see that there's some text, there's something written there, and I'm getting closer, I'm getting closer. And I get nearer to it, and I can read the text. It says, "Don't touch." And I look at it for a second, and I look closer. And it says don't touch. And I reach up and I touch it. And that's when the simulation ends and everything restarts.
Well, you know, I started to think about this because, because I realized like there were many decades, you might remember them, where, you know, I would go months, maybe years without even knowing if I needed a haircut or something. Like you never saw yourself, right? Like if you caught yourself a glimpse in the mirror, maybe, but you never were really aware of what you looked like. But now everybody is so hyper aware, which is why they're becoming so weird, right? I saw the Daily Mail did this thing on this woman who is transforming her. She wants the biggest lips in the world, right? So her lips are already like huge, like with injections, but she wants them bigger. And the doctors are warning her not to do it because she might die because it will burst and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, this is the bot that it's too self-aware, and it's starting to reprogram itself because we're always we have these selfies, we have the social media, we're always looking at ourselves. It's like, it's very Faustian, right? Like these are the sort of negative values, right? That you sacrifice all that's good for things like narcissism or greed or knowledge or things that shouldn't be had, too much that shouldn't be had.
Right. So a couple things. So to follow up on my dot on the wall, you know, we're in the period now where scientifically we're both exploring the microscopic and the macrocosmic. Yeah. So on the microscopic level, you see those images on Twitter of this is a hair follicle through a neutron microscope, whatever it's called, and it's like incredible resolution. Or the face of a gnat blown up 100,000 times, and it's like this huge face of a gnat, and there's like gazillions of them all over the place. Or the Hubble Space Telescope, or the subsequent space telescope. There's a new one out there, the Webb telescope, I believe. So it goes into these galaxies, and they're looking at them, and they're billions of light years away, and it's hugely clarity that's there. So on the hugely macro, they're getting to the point of the Big Bang, going backwards in time with total clarity into the moment the Big Bang happened. Simultaneously, they're looking so deep into the microscopic that they're separating quantumly the atoms into the subparticles and the quarks and all these little subparticles. So those two extremes are going out at the same time. We're getting to the point now where all that is mysterious is no longer mysterious. We see the dot on the wall. We see the face of God, and then it's game over. Now, as far as the narcissism that you talk about, if you look at the old photos before social media, and when people had cameras, and you had to take the photo to the store and get it at the overnight development of the camera, the photomat store. You know, you had to take it there and go back 2 days later to get your photos back. And half those photos are terrible, and you threw them away, and someone was blinking, someone's eye, you know, they weren't well composed. Nobody knew how to pose for the camera. There weren't videos about how to pose for an Instagram photo. It's just people hanging out, looking weird. And of course, those are all gone now. Everyone is a professional model. Everyone knows these. I mean, I know that. I read somewhere if you put your foot in front of you when you're doing a selfie, you know, the lines on the photo look better. So I do that all the time. And sure enough, It looks better.
Because now you're self-aware.
'Cause I'm totally
and that's the problem.
self-aware.
That's why we're going to hit, the programmer is going to hit restart.
Totally.
That's what's going to happen.
I
That's
believe
what
that's true.
happens. That's the Faustian thing that happens. Like
Yes.
it's game over. We have to restart.
I think that's true.
And I think it all started with CERN, and I'm going to get into that because you talk about the macro and the micro.
Yeah.
Everybody always talks about what the fuck happened in 1971, right?
Yes.
And we know what happened when we separated time from value, right? Like time from money. Like we separated money from value.
The optimal
Gold.
volatility formula.
Well, basically, we took the United States off the gold standard, so we went to an all fiat world. So that was basically an experiment on a CERN level of a large hadron collider, like creating a Higgs boson. Like that was a similar sort of event, and it was an experiment that started in 1971. But I'm going to talk about something that happened in 2000, because if you look at all the economic data, the financial data, the wealth and income gap data, from 2000, definitely something happened. And you and I actually spoke about it the last episode, where we talked about how when the WTO admitted China into the World Trade Organization, that was a beginning of this like separation. It's also when 9/11 happened in 2001. So, something 1971 started it, but then something really, the exponential cycle started in 2000. But so you just mentioned the Big Bang. That's the game restart, the reset, I think.
Yes.
And in fact, they're the elite, the ruling class, right? They're talking about the Great Reset, right? So what happened in 2000? Did you know this? I was looking this up.
Talk to me.
The heavy ion program at CERN discovered new state of matter, the Quark Gluon plasma. In the Big Bang theory, Quark Gluon plasma filled the entire universe before matter as we know it was created. So I'm saying in 2000, like that's that Faust moment.
We got to peek into
that you made a deal with the devil to learn knowledge that you shouldn't freaking know. Humans shouldn't know. And we made that deal with the devil, and now we're reaping the whirlwind. Now is the devil has come to collect his due, and that's the Great Reset.
This is also the plot of Walt Disney's Fantasia, starring Mickey Mouse. If you recall, he is left alone in the wizard's laboratory. The wizard is away, and he experiments with the wizard's apparatus. And the brooms are made to bring the pails of water up to the room, and they freak out and go out of control. And the whole place is flooded, and it's a catastrophe. And the wizard comes back and solves it all. But this is kind of a situation where the quark gluons that were looked at and peered at for the first time into the deepest bowels of our cosmic reality were staring us back. And so there's nothing behind that. This is, for lack of a better analogy, the face of God, right?
Yeah.
And so having revealed that now, having gone on that journey, another pop culture reference would, of course, be The Truman Show, where he realizes at the end, the Ed Harris character in The Moon, who's directing the show called The Truman Show, Truman becomes self-aware, and in the end, he goes through the door and leaves, and it's the end of the show. But again, it's metaphorically a depiction of a cosmic reality greater than our knowledge to it. We become aware of it, and then it has to end. Once the knowledge is there in the brain, it has to end. You cannot unknow it. You cannot unknow that knowledge.
Yes.
And of course, knowledge is a virus, and as that knowledge of virus spreads throughout humanity, it engenders what you're referring to here would be a big bang and a new reset.
Yeah, and when you of a Faustian bargain, so that's based on one of the most classic stories of all literature is Faust, right? So when he made a deal, it's self-knowledge, by the way. You make a deal, you're doing something that is perhaps unethical. You're taking a huge risk on something very supreme values, right? So when we created, remember all the stories around CERN, they always have stories like, we're going to do something, we're going to create a black hole. Like, we don't, obviously, maybe they did something, who knows? Like this thing in 2000, something happened in the world that you could see in the data charts. Maybe it's that. Who knows, right?
Right.
Correlation doesn't necessarily equal causation, but certainly there's a ripple in something, the time-space continuum that happened, and it's rippling through our economy and the fabric of our monetary systems.
Right. So, of course, I guess CERN is a particle accelerator. They whip atomic particles around this huge lap track, essentially, and they smash these things together. And the detritus of this atomic smashing are hopefully new particles, new quantum particles. And theoretically, they deduce that they exist, and then they prove that they do exist. So now these CERN maniacs, these scientists with this multi-gazillion-dollar particle smasher, have done it. They finally revealed the quantum gluon. And this is the face of God. And we are at end times. The only way through the portal to the other parallel dimension to support Bitcoin life would be through the airport here in San Salvador. This is the portal into the Bitcoin life. If you get on a plane right now and you fly to San Salvador and you get off that plane and you enter the land of country of Bitcoinization, you will have escaped the gluon nightmare caused by CERN. There's no CERN here.
You're on the ark.
You're on the ark.
You're on the Bitcoin ark.
You're on the Bukele ark.
Well, I mean, that's the thing is, there's some players in this game. If we're in a simulation, like there are some players in the game trying to prevent the reset because, I mean, that's the thing. So when Faust sold his soul to the devil, I remember when you make that bargain with the devil, you're trading something that is of supreme, like spiritual value or moral value. And he traded his soul for knowledge and some magic, right?
Yes.
So Bitcoin is like magic internet money that turned the game off, right? It turned the internet, it turned the self-awareness off. It's like, it's weird that, as well, like when you think of all the, the heavenly virtues and you look at Bitcoiners, you see those, like you see that those are qualities that not necessarily that, when you think of it, like you think of Bitcoiners are toxic, right? And yet a lot of that toxicity, if you dig down, is them trying to nurture what are considered, those heavenly virtues. So I'm going to Google it, but what are your thoughts on that?
A mother, protecting her child from predators would be considered by the predators to be toxic, right? So the ability to protect the Bitcoin maximalist truth that all fiat money is really supports violence at the end of the day. It's pro-violence. Those people who are in the violence business would, of course, call Bitcoin and Bitcoin maximalists toxic. And that's really where the toxicity comes from. Here in El Salvador, they've taken advantage of the fact that Bitcoin, it monetizes love and peace. It's about peace and love. And you feel that in the air. There's no aggressivity here, really, because President Bukele has made the conditions right for people to step forward and work hard and feel like they're part of a mission that's greater than themselves. So I don't want to get too grandiloquent on here, but, John F. Kennedy back in the 60s said, don't ask what the country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And that entire generation rose up. They created the Peace Corps and other institutions, which later became problematic. But I mean, he really did rally a whole generation with that speech. And of course, he also rallied the mission to the moon. So it doesn't take more than a few words. I mean, that was a short speech with JFK, and it had a tremendous impact. People are playing Bukele speeches on Twitter all the time, and not like 500-word speeches. They're saying these 3 sentences, or even this one sentence, like the one sentence that's being quoted often is, "There's plenty of money if you don't steal." Something, not exactly.
Because he posts that all the time, too.
He posts it. But I mean, it's a very simple phrase. And yet, okay, contrast that to what's happening in the United States, for example, with a lot of the scandals happening in the political class. It boils down to people got their hands stuck in the cookie jar, right? They're stealing. And so there's no money for stuff like bridges and tunnels, and the trains keep running off the train tracks. And bridges are collapsing because there's no money for that stuff, because there's a lot of corruption. So these, Again, it doesn't take more than a few simple words, but if those words are stating this simple truth, they can be very powerful.
Exactly. So, but again, it's all like in the Bible you're talking about, that there's angels, there's the archangels, there's the devils, there's the, they're matter, antimatter. Like there's good, there's evil. Like there's a duality to everything. And as Nozomi Hayes would talk about, but there are the 7 heavenly virtues and there's the 7 deadly sins. So there's a match to them. They're the opposites of each other. And that's what, when you walk this path through life, the decisions you make can take you further and further away from the virtues and towards the sins. And I think there are lessons that have stood many generations, thousands and thousands of years for a reason, because like once you take those sort of decisions to sacrifice some supreme virtues or, morals for some thing like, lust or greed or, just a short-term fix, like the 1971 moment, like the 2000 moment, like all these moments is they add up to what you see on the streets of San Francisco or Los Angeles or now DC, like Washington, DC is becoming this supremely dangerous place. And I don't know if you saw what I posted today from the White House press secretary, DC, I guess Biden I guess he has some power to veto like what happens in DC. The DC board had decided to try to reduce maximum sentences for, it seems so surreal, right? Like to watch it, it just seems like it's a deep fake. It can't be real. Like these words aren't real. Like, are they really saying that they want to reduce the penalties for murder, rape, armed robbery, carjackings? Like, it seems like the exact opposite. DC versus what's happening in El Salvador, where El Salvador came from that place. They were already there, and they said no and have stopped it. And you have this flourishing. By the way, one of the the 7 heavenly virtues is hope. Like there's a lot of hope here, right? Like, and justice. Justice is one of them too. So we have justice and hope here. Just 2 of the 7 right there on the top of them. So it just seems weird that like we have. It does seem like a game. Like there's as soon as you do one action over there, there's like seemingly another reaction over there. It seems like El Salvador's been down for decades, and DC was the shining city on the hill that you talk about, and then you often say that El Salvador is now the shining city on the hill. And of course, it makes sense that the shining city on the hill would be now sinking into muck and thinking like, in this. We're past the Faustian bargain they made. We're like Faust is now in hell. He has to give his soul over, and that's like then he finds out what it actually means, what he did. All those, he lived a life of decadence and knowledge and magic and all the stuff, the powers that he had. But then the time came due to hand over his soul, and it wasn't fun. And that's the point we're at in DC.
Right. Now we mentioned the Bible a few times already. We mentioned Ark and Noah's Ark. And so I want to continue on that for a second, because the thing about the Bible is that it was written thousands of years ago, 2,000 years ago or so. And of course, that was a time when people thought the sun, when it set at night, it disappeared.
Yeah,
right.
Sure.
So the knowledge base at that time was extraordinarily limited when compared to today. So the language and the stories of the Bible reflect the reality of that day in terms of people's literacy rate, in terms of how people communicated, the fact that people were mostly spread out, they weren't concentrated so much. And contrast that today when, of course, as we were saying, the scientific discoveries go from the absolute teeniest minuscule to the cosmic reaches beyond our utmost imagination. So people will say scientifically, well, there's no evidence of the ark and there's no evidence of Noah. And they would be completely missing the point. The point of the story is one where society gets so narcissistic and loses itself that there needs to be an escape, essentially. And that's the point of that story. Not that there's actually a big boat with a bunch of animals in it. It's a story that tells what happens when society becomes narcissistic and gross and ugly. And that's the point, and that's true, and that's what we're seeing today. That's what we can learn from that story. It's like not that how many animals can you fit into a big boat, but what happens when your society breaks down, and how do you get rid of it? And what's this 40-day flood about? Well, this 40-day flood could be, for example, AI going wacko and taking control of stuff. That could be the equivalent of a 40-day flood. And then somebody says, let's go to El Salvador because that's Bukele's ark, and we're going to save ourselves that way. So the stories of these, and you mentioned angels and demons, right? So angels and demons are like, oh, there's no proof of that scientifically. And yet what we're saying is that now with AI and deep fakes,
yes,
there are like a new class of angels and demons. You're watching something online, you have no idea whether it's real or fake. Yet the dead people are now being reconstructed digitally online and coming back to act in films, right? A dead Marlon Brando or a dead Elvis Presley is using AI to be reanimated and starring on Broadway. Is that a ghost? Is that a devil? What is that? We don't know. It's a phantom. So that's parallels what the stories have been from the beginning. Remember, it's called his story is history, right? It's a story. It's always a story, and the rules of storytelling are always the same. As you always say, 2,700 years ago with Aristotle, he established the rules of storytelling. They haven't changed. 2,700 years ago, Aristotle said, what's perfect money? Gold at that time. That hasn't changed. The same attributes are the same. Portability, divisibility, fungibility, desirability. It's all the same, but it's now better in Bitcoin. Bitcoin, of course, would be the antidote to all of this that we're saying in terms of a breakdown. So Bitcoin is the ark, Bukele's ark is the country. And so my point being that there's a lot that is simply, predictably, a repeat of the stories that nobody seems to remember, right? They say the problem is that if you don't remember history, you're doomed to repeat it. Well, guess what? Nobody remembers history, and we're all doomed to repeat it, and that's what we're doing. We're repeating our doomed history again and again and again. But it could be, to your other point, that moment in time when ultimate knowledge in the face of God is revealed, and in fact, the great Big Bang and great reset occurs, and this hologram is turned off.
Well, that's like a perfect place to end. But the narcissism you talk about is, I think, finding the things like the Quark Gluon, like that is the ultimate narcissism. Like that's where we came from, and like this need to know, like and see.
To need to know. So we're curious.
Yes,
Humans are curious. That's what drives us to travel from where we are from our birth.
Yep.
Go over the oceans. Yes. Explore space.
Yes.
It's a mystery. We're curious. We build tools. Man likes tools. He builds a wheel. He builds a rocket. And he goes. And of course, when we meet people, they don't know us. We don't know them. But we like his trinkets. He likes my trinkets. So we swap them. We created something called money.
Yeah.
And that money over time has had many different forms. And eventually it turned the form of gold, because gold was the most portable and the most accepted and the most rare at that time. And that's the story of money. It allows for people to satisfy their curiosity, trading with other human beings, and knowledge bases incurred over time. But now, after I was reading, there were, over the history of humanity, when you add it all up, something like 116 billion humans of Homo sapiens have been birthed on planet Earth in total. There's now 7 or 8 billion, 8 billion now. There's been, going back to 2 million years ago, if you add them all up, it's something like 116, 117 billion. But the Homo sapien apparently, according to your theory, and I agree with it, based on the Quark Gluon reveal at the end of the universe, we are the last Homo sapiens, and our digital avatars will continue on in our name, in our image, and they'll wonder about their origin, and we, the Homo sapiens, will have been completely scratched off the face of the earth.
And it's almost like everything we create has a narcissism in it. Like, so when we talk about angels and demons, and you think of it like on Notre Dame, and you look at those gargoyles that are there, and so many people look like gargoyles now, right? We talked about Madonna, but I'm telling you, that woman who wants the biggest lips on earth, they're like that baboon butt or something. Like it's like giant pillows, like huge things on our face. Like we're turning ourselves into gargoyles. Like it is kind of captivating in a way. You can't look away. You're just like, what the fuck is going on, right? But money did that too. Like, that's what happened to money. Like, we swapped. Somebody made that decision, made a Faustian bargain to say, okay, we have this near perfect money, which was gold, and we're going to swap it for this big lipped, you know. There's this model in the UK. I forget her name, but she's like, she wants the biggest boobs ever too. She's doing the biggest boobs. So we like created this money with this like gargoyle like proportions that are just unnatural. And we all can't look away. That's why we're all participating in the stock market and stuff and like trading treasuries and stuff. We just like, nobody could look away because it's kind of captivating how gross and gargoyle like our economy is, and the distortions everywhere. And yeah, you know, Bitcoin is either, like you said, comes from an alien, the alien programmer who like is trying to stop us from having to reset. Like, he's the person who's programmed the simulation doesn't want to have to go all the way back to the beginning, right? You don't want to like turn it off and end your AI experiment. You want them to keep on surviving. So, you know, this Satoshi character is trying to save us with his perfect money.
Yeah, I totally believe that's true. That it was sent by either the future or from the creator or from an alien who is trying to save this simulation, because it's their favorite game. It's like their favorite TV show. It's about to go off the air, and
Yeah.
they're you know, lobbying HBO. Please don't take my favorite show, Planet Earth, off the air. Or I made another kind of comparison with basically using God and he's saving it. You know, he sent down his only son. We crucified him. So he's back with another plan. Turn our greed into altruism.
Yes.
By creating this perfect money that the more you use it, the more fiat money crumbles.
Yeah, but that's the duality that Nozomi talks about too. But the Bible, everything talks about this. It's like that greed versus altruism. Those are the two, like, you have to find some balance between these things.
Well, that balance is sorely lacking, right?
Yes.
The aesthetic.
This is what we're talking about here, Max.
Yeah,
This is
I mean,
what we're
I
talking
think
about.
here's how my plan to restore sanity would be to make dance mandatory.
What?
Because dance requires balance.
Yeah.
And if you learn how to dance as a youngster,
Yeah.
you know, tap dance or ballet dance or any kind of dancing, you understand that your body, for this to work, breakdancing, it must be in balance. It must be in harmony with gravity and your body, and you can't fake it. You're either in balance and tap dancing, or you're on the floor. So I would say bring dance instruction back. Bring Arthur Murray's dance schools. Well, there used to be one in every town in America. Learn ballroom dancing, and with Arthur Murray Dancing School. Bring it back. Yeah. Learn how to frickin' dance, because that's the only way. And look at Snoopy from Peanuts. What was he great at doing? Dancing. He was the best dancer of the Peanuts comic strip. Whenever he had a spare moment, there he was, dancing his way and singing his way through life with his buddy Woodstock, the little bird.
Yeah.
Right? That's what we need. Bring dance back. And even disco can offer some restorative properties in this world gone horribly unbalanced.
I think, didn't, what the fuck happened in 1971? Wasn't that when disco came?
Almost. Yeah. Came very shortly thereafter. Rock and roll died and disco made its appearance, principally because of Saturday Night Fever and the Bee Gees in 1978, which was the year of my high school graduation. So that was the prom night was Saturday Night Fever.
Oh my God.
And also Billy Joel, The Stranger album came out at that time. That was huge at that time. Jackson Browne, Running on Empty was huge in that, I believe, that year. So these were the songs of my 1978 high school graduation. Oh, and of course, the song that you play at the end of the prom.
Stairway to Heaven. Nope.
No, that Beatles song. The Golden Brick Road. What's it called now? Beatles.
I don't even know. Like, I've never. None of my high school dances ever played a Beatles song.
Yeah.
We played Stairway to Heaven all the time.
Yeah.
Because that was like a what? 20-minute long song. Like you can just like dance with.
Yeah, Stairway to Heaven's go, you know, what is that? Now the comment section is going to be aflame with people saying, you're a moron.
You fucking boomer.
You boomer. Oh my God.
Stairway to Heaven.
It's not that freaking song. I'm going to have to, I've run out of time. I'm now officially a boomer without a mind.
Oh, dear.
Well, we'll have to pick it up next show.
We'll pick it up next show. We'll come back with the beat. I mean, you know, well, we're not
The long and winding road. The long and winding road.
Oh my God! Like you're a different generation. That's where we could tell you're a boomer on Gen X, because not often that you really tell that we're different generations, because we're close enough.
Yeah.
Because you're at the end of boomer. I'm at the beginning of Gen X.
Yeah,
So we're like, you know, close.
Smells like Teen Spirit.
Yeah. But those, you know, but there are certain things like that like I definitely never had that at my.
Yeah, definitely Beatles were still huge. Although for me, I was, the Beatles were at that point for me slightly out of range in terms of, because in '62, I believe, is when they appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show.
Yeah.
And that was Beatlemania. So by the time I was 2 years old at that time, so by the time I was 10, 11, 12, it was, the Beatles were slightly on the way out. But so it was more, as I say, of this next, these next artists that came around at the late 60s, early 70s, and then rolling right into disco. So I was smack into disco. And then when I moved to New York City in 1978, it was all the discos.
And hip hop. Early hip hop.
Yeah, early hip hop, but like all the clubs, like Studio 54
and punk
clearly was disco. CBGBs and the punk movement was clearly enforced, and hip hop from the Boogie Down Bronx.
That was like the best time to be in Manhattan. Totally. Like all the best music.
Nobody doubts it. You know,
nobody doubts it.
I was at WNYU. WNYU 89.9, New York's best kept secret. Now we'll be back with the Beastie Boys right after this break from the Student Union Association. Right, so it was, that's Martha Quinn was at WNYU. Then she got recruited to MTV. And that's the end of the show. Now, so, you know, and then going down the long and winding road is come to the end for this edition of Max and Stacy Orange Pill Podcast. We thank you so much for listening and watching, and we wish you all the best in the world. And we're waiting for you at the airport. When you arrive, you'll see a huge poster, 500 feet high and 20 miles long, of Max and Stacy saying, "Welcome to El Salvador. Have a pupusa." Until next time, bye, y'all.
Bye.